Welcome to Marriage IQ, the podcast for the intelligent spouse.
I'm Dr. Heidi Hastings.
And I'm Dr. Scott Hastings.
We are two doctors, two researchers, two spouses, two lovers, and two incredibly different human beings coming together for one purpose: to transform the stinky parts of your marriage into scintillating ones, using intelligence mixed with a little fun. We're really happy to be joined today by a really special guest, Dr. Kathleen Smith. She's the author of a new book, True to You, A Therapist's Guide to Stop Pleasing Others and Start Being Yourself. She's a licensed therapist and also a faculty member at the Bowen Center for the Study of the Family. She also writes about relationships for the popular Substack, The Anxious Overachiever. I think that's really exciting that you actually work right there at the Bowen Center. Can you explain to our listeners who Bowen is and how his theory matters?
The family is a living, breathing organism. We're social creatures. Our families are built to have goals and accomplish things, but also to manage tension and stress. You miss a lot when you just look at the person as an individual. You miss a lot of their functioning and what's going on, and you have to look at the broader system. I started seeing the patterns light up in my own relationships, and it was a lot of fun. It was very interesting to think about my part and what I could do differently. We bump up against people who elicit certain responses out of us, right? And we either take over and want to tell them what to do, or we go along with them and be what they want us to be, or we just get far away from them as quickly as possible. So to give you an example, I'm an only child. I love to work by myself. I've engineered my entire life to some degree to be able to do that, but that's very limiting also. And so the task of moving towards myself is getting away from those factory settings because they can be limiting. Both of those versions are me. It's just which one do I want to live in day to day? Not particularly creative when the anxiety is high. We really only do a couple things.
In Bowen theory, I know he does talk about how our emotional patterns get passed from generation to generation. So what would be some signs that someone is repeating unhealthy patterns that come through generations?
Yeah, when people begin to learn about their families in the past generations, they might find that a lot of people were cut off or estranged. They fell out of contact and they're susceptible to repeating that pattern in their own family. Or they might find that parents were really worried about one kid who had a harder time and they put a lot of anxious focus on them. That can repeat itself. Or you might get this kind of seesaw in a marriage where one person is really over-responsible or over-functions for the other. And that kind of, the kids escape that. It's all caught up in the marriage. And so he noticed that there was 3 or 4 patterns that emerged that you could see in any family or in any system.
I just remember thinking, I have a reason now to explain why I'm so messed up.
But we can't blame it on other people.
I think it helps people be less hard on themselves. If you start to see some of the behaviors not as good or bad, but just adaptive, oh yeah, it makes sense that things would shake out that way.
I like to think of a family system as everybody has their part that they play. And as long as everybody's playing the part that it's not even assigned, but that they just gravitated towards, then the machine functions, even though it may be dysfunctional.
Yeah, there's this idea of what's called functional positions in a family, and how if there aren't huge problems, if the stress is relatively low, families can chug along and do okay. Whereas if there's a real challenge or crisis, the wheels fall off the wagon, and it's not helpful that everybody is stuck in one particular position.
You talk in your book a lot about anxiety and how that impacts our family relationships and our marriage relationships. Can you explain the role anxiety plays within family systems?
Often when people hear about anxiety, they think about the diagnosis of you have an anxiety disorder. When Bowen was talking about anxiety, he defined it as just our responses to threats. That can be a real threat. It can be an imaginary threat. And how good is the individual, but also the family, at determining what's a threat or what's not? has a huge impact on how things go. Let's say you take a family where somebody has a belief or they choose a profession that the family doesn't like. Now, one family might react as if that's a huge threat, and then another family might have a little bit more flexibility in letting the person find their own way. Should the alarm be going off right now or should it not? I make the analogy in my other book about our smoke detectors constantly going off when there's really not a fire. It could be very sensitive. And so in a marriage, if you pay attention to when the alarm goes off, can you stop and say, is this really a problem? Or am I just feeling reactive right now? Has my anxious monitoring of this other person been actually helpful for them? Or has it produced the opposite result and made them distance even more and hide more things from me because it's
Right.
unpleasant to be around me because I'm so
Helping.
mistrustful? I think we can know people so well you don't know them at all. You stop being curious about what their thinking is because you're pretty good at predicting what they think or what they're going to do.
Curiosity, major, massive force for growth in a marriage. Absolutely fundamentally agree with that.
The relationship can adjust, the system can relearn. It's just it takes some time because people want to see if you really mean it. They're going to try and get you to respond the way you used to because that's steady, that's predictable, right?
I keep thinking about the scene from Meet the Parents where they're playing pool volleyball and the girl who's about to get married gets smashed in the face with the volleyball and there's blood all over her. Her mom just jumps right in to save her. And how many times we just jump right in to save our spouse or our child, and in reality, that's really not helpful.
Yeah. That's an interesting question of how do you determine how to be responsible to somebody else and their relationship? And when do people genuinely need help? And when is it just you trying to manage your anxiety?
But they don't know it at the time, and we might not know it at the time. But like you're saying, just consistently over long period of time showing, "Hey, I'm still here. I still love you. I'm not gonna jump in and save you every time."
What's funny to me is I think people know this as parents. They think about it. When do I step in? When do I let my kid fail at something or manage themselves versus scooping in and calming them down? We think about it less with other adults.
I noticed after reading your book that I overfunction in several different places. One is that I constantly tell my husband how to drive. He's in his 50s and has been driving for a long time, but he doesn't really have an internal GPS. And so I find myself constantly telling him where to go and how
My
to drive.
talents lie elsewhere.
But it's one area that I've really tried to change the
Mhm.
last few weeks since reading your book. I try to tell him how to cook. I try to tell him how to load the dishwasher. Sometimes how I think he should parent. What are some other areas in marriage that you see as common ways that our listeners would be able to identify if they're over functioning in their marriage?
Sure. And let me say, I'm also guilty of the driving thing. So I think it's a data point. I try and see it that it's to me, it's the barometer of maybe how stirred up I am at that moment. And can I just pay attention to it and say, oh, yeah. But as far as other places, I think in general, having goals for people that they don't have for themselves, trying to manage their relationships with other people, like kids, their family, your family, friends, colleagues, etc. And just reminding people about things, needing them to be healthy in the way that you're trying to be healthy. It can be so automatic. We get stirred up. It's one way to manage it. Like I said, it's a convenient way. They're there. Can you just put the focus back on yourself and say, what do I want to do with myself in this moment? It's hard to do, but I'll tell my clients just to take 24 hours and write down every time they manage or overfunction for somebody else. Don't even try to not do it. Just pay attention.
So, Kathleen, how did this couple that you were talking about with overfunctioning and underfunctioning for the child, how did you help them look at things in a different way?
So in this particular family, mom sends dad to therapy because dad's doing too much for the adult son. You're the linchpin. You're the one that needs to change, right? It was hard for him to do that. And then she was so focused on him that she ended up cutting off contact with the son. She was like, I don't want to have anything to do with you. And there was more distance there. That's not going to make the dad do less for the son. because now there's
Yep.
only one parent
Yep.
in contact with him. So the cool thing about family systems is it doesn't really matter which one of them starts to shift a little bit. I'm like, do we have any volunteers? And there's this myth, I think, in parenting that people always have to be on the same page about everything. And I don't think that's true. Just a little bit more freedom and flexibility. It doesn't mean that it made everything perfect, but they certainly had a better chance of each trying to figure out how to relate to their son. And also they just enjoyed each other more because they were less caught up in managing each other.